What if I told you that behind Elon Musk's world-changing ambition stands a father whose secrets are darker, stranger, and far more influential than anyone ever imagined? Errol Musk wasn't just the engineer who shaped Elon's genius, he was the storm that forged it. And if you stay until the end, you'll uncover the one family truth Elon spent decades trying to bury, yet could explain everything about the man he became. The making of Errol Musk. Long before the world obsessed over Elon Musk, Pretoria quietly shaped another figure, Errol Musk, a man whose childhood blended British intellectual heritage with South African military discipline. His father, a strict army sergeant, ran their home like a training ground, while his British mother came from a line of highly educated women known for academic excellence. That unusual mix produced a boy whose IQ was considered exceptionally high, and whose early fascination with electrical and mechanical systems would one day influence the upbringing of the richest man on Earth. Pretoria in the mid-20th century wasn't just a city, it was an expanding industrial ecosystem filled with construction sites worth hundreds of thousands of dollars each, new electrical grids, and ambitious infrastructure projects rising everywhere. Young Errol wandered through these spaces the way other children explored playgrounds. He studied scaffolding, watched electricians install circuits, and memorized the geometry of blueprints long before he understood the mathematics behind them. The city itself acted as an engineer's classroom, and Errol absorbed every lesson with obsessive focus. Within this environment lived a Canadian girl whose path kept crossing his, May Haldeman, the woman who would eventually become the mother of Elon Musk. She was already carving out her own identity, modeling for fashion houses, appearing in magazines, and earning income that today would equal over $100,000 a year. Beautiful, disciplined, and relentlessly hard-working, she stood out in every room she walked into, and Errol noticed. Their early encounters, school hallways, neighborhood gatherings, long conversations across shared social circles, built a connection that neither of them could easily ignore. Their relationship didn't unfold smoothly. It stretched through years of on and off romance during university, marked by intensity, distance, and unexpected reunions. Yet Errol's persistence never faded. He proposed more than once, determined to marry May despite their clashes in personality and ambition. When they finally wed, it wasn't the culmination of a fairy tale romance. It was the merging of two fiercely driven individuals whose combined brilliance would silently shape the trajectory of the 21st century. 9 months later came a child who behaved nothing like ordinary children, Elon Musk. The household he was born into carried an unusual texture. It wasn't wealthy in the way people imagine today, but it was filled with engineering tools, scientific books, and technical documents that Errol brought home from projects often valued between $250,000 and $400,000. These materials lay scattered around the house like artifacts of an engineer's private laboratory, and young Elon absorbed them instinctively. By age 4, Elon was asking questions that startled adults, abstract, cosmic, philosophical ideas far beyond typical development. One of his earliest questions, "Where is the whole world?" stayed with Errol for decades. It wasn't curiosity, it was the early formation of a mind that viewed reality differently, a mind that would one day build companies worth hundreds of billions of dollars and attempt to colonize Mars. And in those early years, before the chaos, before the broken relationships, before Elon transformed into the most influential industrialist of his generation, Errol Musk believed he was raising a prodigy shaped by his own intellect. But time would force a deeper question. Did Elon's brilliance come from Errol? Or did it come from trying to escape him? Comment Musk or against if you believe Elon's greatness was driven more by rebellion than inheritance. A childhood of privilege. Growing up in Pretoria, Elon Musk stepped into a world shaped not by luxury in the traditional sense, but by the constant presence of machinery, tools, and the quiet hum of engineering projects worth hundreds of thousands of dollars each. His father, Errol Musk, owned multiple construction and electrical contracts across the region, and that steady stream of technical work created a childhood environment where blueprints and voltage meters were more common than toys. The Musk home never resembled the futuristic mansions people associate with Elon today, but it held something more valuable: direct access to real engineering practice, long before most children even learned multiplication tables. On weekends and school breaks, Elon and his younger brother Kimball followed Errol to job sites scattered throughout Pretoria's commercial districts. These weren't small projects. They included electrical rewiring for multi-story office buildings, structural assessments for properties valued at $250,000 to $400,000, and installation work requiring precise calculations and an understanding of load-bearing systems. While other children stayed home watching cartoons, Elon spent hours observing electricians strip copper wire, plumbers fit pressure valves, and bricklayers align foundations with military precision. Errol didn't hand him fake assignments or gentle demonstrations. He let him watch the real thing, the kind of hands-on exposure that shapes instinct long before theory enters the picture. Those experiences formed the first layer of Elon's practical intelligence, but the second layer arrived unexpectedly through a machine that at the time felt like a mysterious window into another universe, a computer. In the early 1980s, computers were rare in South Africa, expensive tools reserved for universities, banks and research institutions. Yet Errol, hearing murmurs about the emerging field of computer science, decided to enroll 11-year-old Elon in a programming course at the University of the Witwatersrand, even though the minimum age requirement was technically much higher. It was an audacious decision, but not unusual for a father who believed his son was already thinking far beyond his years. When Elon walked into the classroom, filled entirely with adults, he wasn't intimidated, he was captivated. The instructors quickly realized he wasn't merely curious, he was processing the logic of programming faster than some of the university students themselves. His ability to grasp loops, memory structures, and command sequences alarmed the professors just enough that they insisted Errol purchase a personal computer for him. Even with a special discount, the machine cost the modern equivalent of several $1,000s, a significant purchase for any household at the time. Elon brought it home and immersed himself in it with monastic obsession. Manuals, code sheets, simple programs, every input was a new piece of the puzzle. Within months, he developed enough fluency to take a programming aptitude test at the University of Pretoria, where he scored an A+, a result so unexpectedly high the administrators retested him under stricter conditions, only to witness the same outcome again. These were not accidents or isolated moments of brilliance. They were the early signals of a mind absorbing technology at a rate few could match. And in the backdrop of his father's structured, tool-filled world, Elon found the one machine that didn't just explain how things worked, it offered a way to build entirely new worlds from nothing. The divorce that shattered everything. By the late 1970s, the marriage between Errol Musk and May Musk had begun to fracture under the weight of clashing personalities, growing resentment, and a household atmosphere that felt increasingly volatile. In 1979, the separation became official, and 8-year-old Elon Musk found himself standing at the center of a family that had split into two sharply different worlds. The home that once echoed with engineering tools and quiet routines suddenly transformed into two separate lives, one shaped by May's determination to survive as a single mother, and the other shaped by Errol's complex, unpredictable temperament. Life with May became a lesson in resilience rather than comfort. Far from the financial steadiness she once had, she now juggled multiple jobs to support Elon, Kimball, and Tosca. She worked as a dietitian during the day, took modeling assignments on weekends, and squeezed in administrative work at night. Groceries were chosen based on cost, not preference. She often bought second-hand clothing and stretched ingredients to create meals that were both inexpensive and nutritious. Years later, she would recall moments like crying when milk spilled, not because of the mess, but because every cent mattered. Their small apartments, often in modest buildings with aging infrastructure, were a stark contrast to the middle-class life they once knew. But the outward struggle wasn't what shaped Elon the most, it was the emotional landscape underneath it. He later described his childhood not with nostalgia, but with a single word: misery. Not physical hardship, not deprivation, but a deeper emotional weight connected to the man he would eventually distance himself from, his father. After the divorce, Errol lived alone in Johannesburg, surrounded by properties and investments he had built over years of engineering work. These included real estate holdings valued in the tens of thousands of dollars, a small fleet of technical equipment, and a collection of personal tools and machinery that filled his home the way books fill a library. Yet despite these assets, he felt isolated, and for reasons he couldn't fully explain, young Elon felt sympathy for him. In one of the decisions that would haunt him for decades, Elon chose to move back in with Errol, believing his father needed company. Instead, he walked into an environment that would leave a permanent imprint on his psyche. He later described Errol using phrases that conveyed not anger, but deep emotional complexity, calling him a terrible human and hinting at carefully thought-out plans that left him unsettled. These words weren't accusations of physical harm, they were reflections of a child grappling with a parent whose emotional presence felt overwhelmingly heavy and unpredictable. The atmosphere grew more complicated when unsettling facts about Errol emerged in the years following the divorce. He legally discharged a firearm in self-defense, resulting in the death of 3 intruders, a case verified by police and upheld in court. And later he fathered a child with Jana Bezuidenhout, the daughter from a previous marriage of a woman he once married. It was a decision that shocked both his family and the public, adding yet another layer to the complicated legacy surrounding him. For Elon, these events didn't define Errol, they amplified what he already felt. That his father's world was a maze of contradictions, brilliance tangled with choices he struggled to understand. And in many ways, this chapter marked the beginning of the psychological distance that would shape the rest of his life. The Emerald Mine controversy, 2 opposing realities. As Elon Musk grew older, a new narrative began to shadow his rise, one that didn't come from Silicon Valley, investors or journalists, but from inside his own family. Errol Musk, confident and unfiltered as always, started recounting tales of a period he described as the peak of his financial life. In his version of events, he once owned half of an emerald mine in Zambia, a business arrangement he claimed produced so much cash that the household safe couldn't even be closed. It was a story filled with images of abundance, raw gemstones exchanged in back rooms, pilots flying cargo across borders, and sudden injections of income that, if true, could have been worth several $1 million in today's valuation. According to Errol, the mine wasn't some mysterious rumor, it was part of an informal partnership formed in the late 1970s when mining concessions in the region were undergoing rapid privatization. He described visiting mining sites, negotiating with prospectors, and transporting uncut emeralds through networks that were, at the time, notoriously unstable. These weren't safe business channels. They were unpredictable terrains where prices fluctuated wildly and deals depended on trust more than contracts. If taken at face value, Errol's version paints a picture of a man navigating a dangerous but potentially lucrative frontier economy, one where a single stone could fetch tens of thousands of dollars and a successful shipment could cover an entire year of living expenses. But the story didn't remain uncontested. When these claims resurfaced decades later, Elon Musk responded with immediate and absolute rejection. He insisted that no emerald wealth ever supported him, and that his early life, particularly his university years, reflected nothing close to the abundance Errol described. Elon mentioned working multiple jobs to cover tuition, dealing with $100,000 in student debt, and lacking even the funds to buy a second computer when he and his brother launched their first startup, Zip2. He also emphasized that he emigrated from South Africa with only $2,000 and 2 suitcases. A story consistent with classmates and early colleagues who recalled him living in cheap rentals and sleeping on office floors while building Zip2's earliest codebase. The contrast between the 2 accounts became one of the most puzzling family contradictions in tech history. If Errol truly had access to gemstone wealth, why didn't any of it appear in Elon's early financial records? Why did Elon share a tiny apartment with multiple roommates in college or debate whether he could afford basic equipment during his startup years? Why did he take, by his own account, every low-paying job available, from working in a boiler room to cold-calling businesses for market research firms? Some analysts suggested that if the emerald mine existed, it may have operated at a level far smaller than Errol's later recollections implied. Others speculated that the venture may have generated revenue but never reached the household in a meaningful way. There were even theories that Errol's version of events reflected the kind of selective memory that often appears when revisiting past successes long after they've faded. What made the controversy endure wasn't the money, it was the symbolism. If Errol's story was true, it meant Elon came from hidden wealth. If Elon's story was true, it meant his climb from obscurity was even more improbable than people realized. And as both narratives continued to circulate, the gap between them revealed a deeper truth about the Musk family, that even in matters of wealth, memory, and legacy, father and son lived in entirely different worlds. Elon's first rebellion against his father. By the time Elon Musk reached his late teens, one belief had already taken root so deeply it felt like a second heartbeat. The future, real innovation, real technology, real possibility was in the United States. South Africa offered structure, discipline, and engineering exposure, but it didn't offer the one thing Elon craved most: a direct path into the world he saw in magazines about Silicon Valley giants and aerospace research programs funded with budgets in the hundreds of millions of dollars. He knew he had to leave, and he also knew his father would never approve. At 17, Elon found a loophole woven into his own family history. His mother, May Musk, was born in Canada, which meant he could apply for Canadian citizenship and slip out of South Africa without triggering mandatory military service. The decision wasn't glamorous, it was survival. He arrived in Canada with just $2,000, 2 suitcases, and no guarantee that anyone would take him in. His first months were a study in humility, working on a farm in Saskatchewan, shoveling grain, cutting logs, and performing labor that paid barely enough to cover winter clothing. Nights were spent on a cousin's couch, wrapped in layers because the farmhouse heating often struggled against temperatures dropping below -20. Eventually, he made his way to Toronto, securing a spot in a rent-controlled apartment at 4000 Yonge Street, where he slept on a threadbare couch and split expenses that ranged from utilities under $50 a month to groceries carefully calculated to the cent. But even in that cramped apartment, something remarkable happened. Elon started piecing together the documents and processes needed to bring May, Kimball, and Tosca to Canada. At an age when most teenagers debated college majors, he was reconstructing an entire family unit from the ground up. When Errol Musk heard of Elon's plans, he dismissed them instantly, calling his son an idiot who would return to South Africa within 3 months. But Elon didn't return. Instead, he stepped onto the exact path that one day would lead to Tesla, SpaceX, and companies valued in the tens of billions of dollars. A path that began not with privilege, but with a one-way ticket, a winter coat, and a rented couch in a Canadian apartment. How a broken childhood created Elon Musk. As Elon Musk stepped into adulthood, something deeper than ambition began to surface. An internal engine running not on privilege or inheritance, but on a force far more volatile. Reporters, biographers, and even psychologists studying his rise pointed to a single recurring theme: the idea that Elon's obsession with building, improving, and safeguarding the future was not merely business strategy, it was response, it was recoil, it was a lifelong attempt to create the opposite of the emotional landscape he grew up in. When he founded Zip2, slept on an office floor to avoid paying rent, and pushed the company until it sold for $307 million, observers saw relentlessness. Elon saw survival. Years later, when he invested nearly his entire net worth into Tesla, at a time when the company was hemorrhaging cash and its early electric prototypes cost over $140,000 to produce, critics called it reckless. Elon called it necessary. And when he poured everything into SpaceX, building rockets valued between $60 million and $90 million each, fully prepared to face bankruptcy if the fourth launch failed, he wasn't just gambling, he was fighting a shadow only he understood. Analysts began describing Elon's trajectory as a creation bond, the inverse of the childhood tension he carried. Where his early home life had been unpredictable, he built companies defined by precision. Where he had felt powerless, he engineered technology that gave humanity reach beyond Earth. And where dark emotional memories once lingered, he filled the void with missions to expand solar energy, stabilize planetary life, and one day establish a city on Mars. Even Errol Musk, both critical and admiring in alternating breaths, once admitted he believed Elon would reach Mars, though he doubted Elon would invite him along. That contrast, skepticism and belief intertwined, mirrored the very duality that shaped Elon from the beginning. Comment Mars Drive if you believe Elon's ambition came from far more than business goals. Errol Musk's shadow lingers over every chapter of Elon's rise, from the brilliance he inherited to the wounds he's still trying to outrun. His life is a reminder that even the world's greatest innovators are shaped by forces far more personal than money, power, or fame. If this story opened your eyes to the mystery behind the Musk legacy, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel, and stay ready, because part 2 will reveal the darkest secrets Errol never wanted the world to hear.